Next up, Lily, please take it away. Looking forward to hearing from you.
My name is Lily. I'm the president of the Solana Foundation. And let's see, who here is familiar with Solana? Probably. OK, great. Most people have heard of Solana. It is a top 5 protocol. So, everyone's familiar with Bitcoin, with Ethereum, and, as we all know, after the whole 2017 ICO boom and CryptoKitties, there's a whole plethora of innovation around sort of how do we create a more scalable, decentralized infrastructure for building decentralized applications on. Many, many approaches, lots of different architectures. And one of the insights from Solana early on is a kind of sequential execution kind of framework, which is essentially how EVM operates, is something that's going to be inherently limited, and the potential to scale that longer term through, some sort of 7-layer cake of L2s, L3s, sequencers, so on and so forth, is going to have a number of different challenges. And in my opinion, I think that's what we're running into right now. And so the approach with Solana was, okay, first principles, the problem here is we believe that, I would say we all collectively believe, by dint of being here, that sort of decentralized infrastructure should exist and can support not just digital gold, but a flourishing ecosystem of decentralized applications in the same way that Web 2 today supports, literally sort of every applications that are in every part of our lives, right? And so to do that, the internet, if we were all stuck on 56K modems, would be a little bit hard to use. And that kind of base layer infrastructure got upgraded progressively over time to now always on broadband, Ethernet, fiber, so on and so forth, right? So scalability, yes, is a consideration, is a really big deal, right? Biggest factor from preventing markets from leveraging blockchains to power their economies and really sort of support, let's call it, the billion users using blockchain. And so instead of sort of going directly to sharding, the premise at the time was single shard, right? How is that even possible? And Toli, having worked at Qualcomm, which is, essentially massively parallelized physical network, being able to coordinate sort of real-time communication around the world, was kind of the perspective of his inspiration. So parallel execution is the name of the game here, and so Solana sort of brought a number of concepts to the table, proof of history, right? Scaling at the sort of top end of hardware, and so we're really sort of try to maximize usage of advanced hardware, kind of on the edge between CPU and GPU. And the perspective, which is, I think, one that is still today a little bit sort of unique, is that instead of going directly to L2s and basically building all this infrastructure to build on top of 56K modem, we still have a lot of work to do to bring bandwidth to decentralized networks. And so the state of Solana today, it is the world's most used blockchain, and this is even if you take consensus transactions out. More daily transactions than all other chains combined. And so as an example, Star Atlas, which is a game within Solana, just did 800,000 transactions in 24 hours at their launch, and I don't believe anyone else can support that. And also the most active fee payers of any blockchain, right? And this is all happening on single shard with about, between 2,500 and 4,000 TPS. Fastest blockchain, right? I still remember the days of Bitcoin. You click a button, you go refresh your blockchain explorer for an hour. And Solana's brought that down from hours to minutes to 400 milliseconds. And we're continuing to improve on that. So that's, not the end state. That's just sort of the state that we're in right now. Decentralization, I think that this has been a critique that I've heard a number of times. I will say that it's somewhat outdated data from maybe 2021. Amongst proof-of-stake chains, Solana actually does have the highest sort of Nakamoto coefficient. For those of you who are not aware, it's sort of the number of nodes that would need to coordinate maliciously in order to corrupt the network, 33% in this case. So, we've been progressively sort of focused on building a very truly decentralized sort of hardware network, around 2,000 nodes today, Nakamoto coefficient of 34, and within that, there's also pretty considerable ASN diversity, so it's not like 1,000 of those nodes nodes are sitting in AWS in Germany or something like that. The thing that we're probably the most proud of is having the #2 developer community after EVM, right? In crypto, if you have a network and no one uses it, it's essentially sort of like having an empty plot of land rather than a city. And what really sort of gives life to blockchains is the community that comes together and is actively innovating and building on top of the network, right? If there's no network, nothing for developers to do, but if there's no developers, there's nothing for anyone else to do, right? And so, that in my mind is always the biggest achievement of any L1 ecosystem, and that's the thing that we're the most proud of. About 2,000 active developers. EVM is around 15,000 between all of the various EVM chains out there. So let's see. Last year, one of the things that certainly Solana, I think, deservedly got a lot of critiques for was chain outages, and so that took about 9 to 12 months to put in some pretty cool changes at the network level. Ripped and replaced the transport protocol, and I think the coolest thing that we actually implemented is localized fee markets. So as we're all aware, as users of mainnet, ETH mainnet is if there's some trading hotspot happening on, let's call it Uniswap, on an active trading day, everyone goes from paying $2 a click to $20 a click, right? Because it's unified state, unified demand. And with localized fee markets, it's a little bit sort of like Uber hotspots, right? If there's a hotspot around downtown, those people get surge pricing, but everyone else is doing just fine and pays their normal rate. And so what that means is that if there's a lot of people competing for an NFT drop, they might be paying crazy fees. But on Solana, if I'm just trying to pay my friend $10 for coffee, only in Switzerland does coffee cost $10, then I can still pay 0.001 cents for that transaction, and it'll clear in 400 milliseconds. So some other things that we've been doing quietly now, but I think this will be a big deal in the next 6 to 9 months. So we partnered with Jump Crypto on something called FireDancer. And what FireDancer is, it's a second client for Solana, and right now the only other chain that has a second client is ETH. And so I was saying earlier, we have around 2,500 to 4,000 TPS today. In sort of internal tests with FireDancer, million TPS in the field, I think we can expect about 100,000. And so comparatively, I mean, this is really just sort of, Solana is already sort of the most performant chain. The only chain out there, you click a button, something happens, and you can actually implement sort of, things like on-chain clubs. And so this is, coming down the pipe in the next year or so, and that's going to be really sort of a game changer, and I think really just going to put this sort of network in a different kind of field of performance. So another one that I think is, might sound a little bit dry, but is one of those things in crypto where sort of seemingly sort of marginal or seemingly like very detailed innovations at the protocol layer actually are sort of like the chaos butterfly wings effect and have a massive sort of impact downstream. Something that we launched recently called state compression. So essentially what this is when you mint an NFT, there's a lot of metadata that needs to go along with that, and it costs a lot of money to execute those contracts, right? A lot of money on some chains, a little bit less, but on Solana initially it was about $1. So we implemented Merkle roots, and what that means is all the metadata is actually Merkleized on chain and therefore not sitting natively on chain. And so now we took the cost of minting 1 million NFTs down to $100. That would cost you millions of dollars on mainnet, and Polygon would probably cost you about 20x that. So that's pretty powerful, because what this all means is it's not just about sort of fast and cheap at the end of the day. What that means is this is infrastructure that can take crypto from being in a place of, imagine Netflix in a world of 56K internet. They're mailing you DVDs back and forth. 20 years later, when you have proper infrastructure, bandwidth, then what you have is you have the same company ostensibly, but a completely different product building this entire sort of streaming application space, and it's really only the same company in name only, right? And so that's also sort of what we're trying to enable here with Solana. It's not just about fast and cheap. It's about things like, okay, if you can mint 1 million NFTs for $100, now what can you do with NFTs? If it's so cheap and so accessible, then you can actually start to realize things like decentralized identity, where NFTs should really be sort of your credentials and your in aspects of your identity held in your wallet because it's basically infinitesimally sort of cheap and accessible to do so. And those are the types of things that you really can't do if it costs $1, 10 cents, and certainly not $10 to mint an NFT, because then you're stuck in a space where NFTs have to be PFPs and things that inherently sort of are valuable themselves. And then lastly, another thing that we're really excited about is, it has been a very high hardware requirement in order to be running a node thus far, and in pretty advanced data centers. So the corollary of FireDancer is Tiny Dancer is what we call it, light client, which means that you can run a light client for Solana on a laptop, and so that's pretty exciting because that starts to provide alternatives to, up until now, the very high hardware requirement to be running a Solana node. So some other things I'll just go through, right? That's the infrastructure stuff. Sounds dry sometimes, but I actually think right now in crypto, what is some of the most important stuff to do is to be building kind of innovative solutions at the technical layer, really just above the validator client. And as we look forward and how does this actually flow through into things that sort of have emotion to them, DPIN is one, right? DPIN, which is decentralized physical infrastructure networks, things like decentralized mapping, Helium, right, Render. Those are the types of things that are pretty uniquely sort of only available to you on a performant network like Solana today. Some of these other categories I think people will be quite familiar with. But I think, really the way I think about this is in each of these categories, in order to actually create a user experience which is competitive with what we are so used to in Web 2, you just have to have Ethernet, right? And that's essentially sort of what we've been trying to work towards. And that's something that supports innovation and creativity and usability in really every application vertical. So some other things you might have heard of, Solana Phone, brands building on Solana. Yeah, those are some of the latest things happening in Solana. And let me know if you have any questions.